course, had another question.
Sure.
Was at a county council at-large debate last month, and there was agreement both from Republicans and Democrats that the idea that Councilman Elrich has had about the bus rapid transit is a good one. How do you go from making that kind of a proposal where it is right now to moving the ball forward on that in these tough budget times? You talked about infrastructure. I'm just kind of asking, how much can you do given the budget realities on things like transit, like bus rapid transit?
Well, I was one of the first ones to agree that was an excellent idea and advanced it. And what I did in my budget a year ago was to put in $500,000 that's in the budget to help advance that, to study that, and to make certain that we had the proper analysis to review it in a way that made sense. And so I'm a very strong proponent of the ideas, and we simply trying to advance it now beyond the sort of conceptual stage to something much more firm in that regard. I would also announce probably sometime toward the end of this year a task force on transit to deal with not only the bus rapid but the Purple Line and Quarter City Transit, to combine both the public and private sector to look at how we can better facilitate greater transit use in a time of limited dollars, to explore some of the private initiatives that have been advanced about, well, if you can't do it from a government perspective, there's a way you can do it from a private perspective. So we will be announcing sometime toward the end of this year a transit commission designed to go out and push these ideas out, because when you look at the county in terms of transportation needs and the cost involved, unless we're able to come up with some creative, inventive ways in which to advance transit, it will be very difficult for us to go back now and make certain that the master plans that we talked about are actually realized, because we can't do that. We're not going to see the advancement we want in Science City. We don't get the modal split that we need in White Flint. It doesn't advance right. If we don't do it right in Shaded Road, it simply will be hampered by that. So we have to make this work, because the other alternatives, we can't build enough roads, and it's too costly, expensive for us to do it. And part of the economic vitality of the county is dependent upon our ability to have the infrastructure in place to advance some of these projects.
I'd be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to ask about immigration. A year and a half ago, we pushed the policy to kind of address certain shortfalls in the way people are arrested. With the political change in Washington recently, do you see this immigration reform that the county's essentially been waiting for? Do you see that taking longer? Is it going to happen? Are you still optimistic, or do we just keep waiting?
Unfortunately, I don't think that it will be at the agenda of at least of the House. That the people who are running tend to have had a very negative attitude about reform. And that's unfortunate, because we are sort of caught in a crossfire here in the middle of competing interests of a strong anti-immigration attitude that does not deal with the realities that are on the ground. We're not going to see 12 million people just simply disappear from the United States overnight. We're not going to solve the problems by ignoring it and assuming that it doesn't exist. And I just think that it's unfortunate that we will not, probably now we're further away from any kind of meaningful reform to get this problem resolved. I'm a strong proponent that it needs to be resolved at the federal level, because it is too difficult for local communities to, in fact, deal with this. Yeah, you could have a community that cracks down on this or does that here or there, but you end up shifting the problem somewhere else, or it becomes even more difficult to address and to deal with. So I am not as hopeful as I was, say, before last Tuesday.
So then do you foresee having to make further adjustments to the county's policy?
Not right now. I think that we've tried to balance it in a way it says that Montgomery County will be at least tolerant, supportive in certain places, but at the same time, we have a policy that makes certain that the county residents feel that we are doing this in a reasonable and balanced way. And a variety of things that we've done to try to address that, where people have had concerns about Montgomery County becoming the location where more immigrants come than other places. I think that we try to make certain that the resources that we have are properly dispensed and that they're done appropriately and with the proper legal safeguards. Where people have had concerns about crime, we try to make certain that people who are undocumented involved, at least in serious crimes that I announced last year, that they are dealt with in the federal system as such. And so when you look at it on a whole, I think that we've balanced it fairly well. Now, I hear from people on both sides who say, well, you're still being too supportive. You're still utilizing tax dollars in a way that we don't support. And then I hear from others who said, what you're doing is too restrictive and you don't have the right balance. And so when I look at it at the end of the day, it concludes for me that we do have it, at least for now. But that's not a permanent solution to a problem that needs national attention.
You're going to stick with Montgomery College's in-county tuition for the...
I'm not one who disagrees with what they're doing. We're talking to people who attended schools in Maryland, in Montgomery County. And how does that help us that we are putting up barriers that further remove people from being properly integrated and involved in our community? So I'm not one to go out and say what they're doing is wrong. I think that's a decision that they have to make, and I don't object to what they're doing.
I want to make sure Sebastian's done with his questioning, because that's a good segue for what I wanted to ask about schools.
Mm-hmm.
A big part of the budget has become an increasingly large part of the budget under Dr. Jerry Wiest. In January, I believe, the school board starts in earnest and search for a new superintendent, and it's up to them to hire that person. But what is your role through that transition?
Well, it's really almost exclusively the school board's decision. I've spoken to individual board members, and I've spoken publicly to say, first of all, that I think Dr. Wiest has done an excellent job. When you look at the performance of the students in Montgomery County and where the school system ranks and how well our kids perform, I think the proof is in the pudding. I think it's there to suggest that he's done an excellent job. And I like the idea that you have a superintendent who's aggressive, who is bold, who's creative, and is willing to get out and fight and to be an advocate for the school system. That may at times mean that we disagree about some of the funding and some of the other fights that we get into, but I'd much rather have a person who is actively engaged in that process and fighting for that, and will let the chips fall where they may. So I have, I've had a strong belief for a number of years that they've been on the right track. They've increased performance. They've done an excellent job with minority students. That doesn't mean that there are no places for improvement. And so I've let them know that they need a superintendent who can work with the council, the county executive, and to not only understand the nuances of policy, but also to be a strong advocate, to be a person who utilizes their leadership, even in a political way, fighting with the governor and the state legislature and the county council. And hopefully, given the legacy of accomplishments here, I believe that we're going to get a number of outstanding candidates who are going to come forward for this job. But I think that his shoes are going to be very difficult to fill.